Welcome back to Ring of Fire. I'm Mike Papantonio. The traditional mainstream media does a poor job telling the story of how faulty medical devices and drugs make it onto the market. The part of this story they miss is that these companies routinely put profits over the safety of their patients, and they rush to put their faulty products on the market to beat their competitors. This means we get products that haven't been properly tested or studied at all sometimes. Joining me now to discuss one of the latest products that's ruining the lives of American consumers is attorney Daniel Nigh. Daniel, the latest, it seems like every week now we're seeing a product recall of some type. This one is the Stryker recall. Tell us what the Stryker recall is and how serious it is.
That's right, Pap. This is a very serious recall. Actually, they announced the recall July 6, 2012. But they're Stryker's finally meeting with surgeons to actually release the recall and let patients know that their product's been recalled. So at this point, 20,000 patients across the U.S. have received one of two products that have been recalled by Stryker. First is the Stryker Rejuvenate. It's a femoral stem implant, and another one is the ABG2 femoral stem implant.
What is the defect? I mean, every time there's a recall, we hear bits and pieces about the defect. What's the problem here? How is it harming people?
Right, here's the issue. When these products first come out, the idea is these surgeons have this wish list that they would like to try to make surgeries easier. So for these Stryker Rejuvenate, surgeons said that they would like to have a more modular stem. And so what the companies, the manufacturers then do is they come up with these quick fixes. And without engineering or testing the fixes or seeing how they actually work inside of a patient, they then release the product. So here, they release this product which they call a modular stem. So they've got a small little component that goes inside of the femoral stem, and this extra modularity caused all sorts of cobalt and chromium to shed off that modular point in the product.
Okay, let me back up here just a little bit. First of all, everybody watching this program, we believe that the FDA actually watches over us on products like this. Didn't the FDA test this? Didn't the FDA do their due diligence before this product was put on the market?
No, absolutely not. There's two ways which products get to the market. The first one is the pre-market approval, which is what most people think of, and that is you get to the market and you actually have to prove to the FDA that your product works, and so you show them clinical trials and you show them all sorts of tests that have been conducted on the product. What most people don't realize is that over 90% of these hip implant products that are on the market never received a pre-market approval. What they actually have is what's known as a 510K approval. And in fact, the FDA doesn't call it approval because they don't want to call it as such. It's just clearance. And they allow these manufacturers to market these products by saying their product is substantially similar to another product on the market. They get a rubber stamp and off they go, and they get to clear these products and start marketing them on the market.
So in other words, if you believe that, in other words, people believing that this product that the doctor's getting ready to put in somebody's body has been thoroughly checked and it's been checked off on by the FDA, you're just absolutely wrong. Did I get that right?
That's right. It's just completely wrong. They haven't been tested anything compared to what we think they are. And in fact, what happens then is the company goes and aggressively markets it as if it has been a new tried, proven technology. But what we know is it's completely false.
Let me ask you this, Daniel. You talked about the types of physical problems that are attached to this product. You mentioned cobalt and chromium being something that can, I suppose, affect the human body. Explain that and explain what that has to do with the implant.
Right. Well, these cobalt and chromium ions are shed from the product itself and they go out into the body. And there's two things which we think about when we think about injuries to a person. First off, those cobalt and chromium ions, they can get out into the bloodstream and travel to all your other organs in the body. And scientists are still unsure just how bad of a problem this may cause to a person's heart, brain, thyroid, certain other issues that are still being investigated today, which of course, we should have those answers before people have these products put in them and they're guinea pigs with these cobalt and chromium ions. But the second thing is the local injuries around the hip implant. It's well proven, well documented that people with these high levels of cobalt and chromium ions in their body are having all sorts of tissue necrosis around the hip implant. They're having bone deterioration.
When you talk about tissue necrosis, that is just the tissue that's rotting away, isn't it?
That's right. When surgeons open this up, they see in there, they see black, dead, dying tissue. And in fact, I've heard them describe it as dog food, coffee grinds, all other sorts of things, which is completely unnatural for the human body.
So with this necrosis, then it sounds like the other part of it is that it's one thing to recall the product, but then this isn't like recalling an automobile where you simply have to change a timing belt. What does the doctor have to do to get this hip implant out of the patient to be able to put something legitimate in?
That's exactly right. The first thing it takes is once they have these high levels of cobalt and chromium detected in the body, or they're having significant pain from the prosthesis, first thing they're going to have to do is they're going to have the product revised. And what we know about revisions is just revisions in general is already more difficult than the initial hip implant. But on top of that, they've got all these issues that they have to deal with the metallosis. So that means they have to clear out all that dead, dying tissue, saw away all that deteriorated bone, and it's a much more difficult revision. But on top of that, the most difficult part of the entire procedure is, and what's unique about the Stryker femoral stem from all the other hip implants that we've seen out there, is that the femoral stem is well fixed in the femur and it has to come out. In fact, surgeons have described this as rebar inside of cement. It is that hard in there, and that stem has to come out, which generally means, you know, the surgeon's either going to have to saw inside of that femur to get it out, or he's going to have to break the femur itself to get it out, and then he's going to have to wrap around cables around it and put screws into that femur just to try to keep that thing back in place.
Why do we, let's talk about the political and social issues of this. Why do we keep seeing product after product? I would say, I don't know how long you've been practicing, but I would say probably in your career, you've probably seen 20 recalls, the same caliber of severity as this. Why does this keep happening?
Well, the biggest reason is because it takes nothing to essentially get the product on the market, that 510K rubber stamp, and they get a product on the market. The orthopedic manufacturers are not known for testing their devices before they enter it in the market, and then aggressively, market the product as if as if it's God gift to mankind, but it really does nothing.
Let me ask you, Daniel. We keep hearing about this idea of industry capture. That is where the industry has their people working for the FDA, and the FDA comes out and when a scientist leaves the FDA, they end up going to work for industry. So it's this revolving door, and with this revolving door, how does anything ever really change? Because all the people involved, directly or indirectly, work for the industry. How do we solve that?
Well, that's right. I mean, the other unfortunate side of everything is that much of the scientific research, and probably 90% of the scientific research out there on orthopedic devices, and we see the same thing with pharmaceuticals, is that they're controlled by industry. And so we're not getting good science because the dollars are clearly driven to promote these products. What we will also see is we will see that when there's bad research, in other words, research that doesn't promote the product, they do away with the journal or the study altogether. So I think the number one thing that we need to do is that when a study starts, it needs to end, and that study needs to be published regardless of who's paying for it.
Daniel, I always tell people that ask about this topic, I tell them under no circumstances should they use a product, whether it's a pharmaceutical or an implant, any medical product, they should never use a product unless it's been on the market at least 10 years. Do you agree, or is that overstatement?
No, it's not overstatement at all, Pappy. What we see is that with the metal-on-metal fiasco, there was a product on the market called metal-on polyethylene, well proven, well documented, and we saw that it was a great product. But then everybody started switching over to this metal-on-metal. It wasn't on the marketplace for not even 5 years, and all sorts of traffic was being driven to it, and we saw all sorts of revisions from it.
Daniel, you hear constantly the pharmaceutical industry and the medical device industry whining that they have to spend so much money for product development. That's just purely a lie, isn't it? The money that they spend doesn't have to do with developing the product, it simply has to do with marketing, where the numbers are 70 to 80% of all this money the industry says they're spending actually is spent on marketing the product. So tell me about the marketing plan for Stryker.
Well, that's completely right. 70–80% is spent on marketing the product, and then the other 20 to 30%, which we talk about journals and research, that's just another form of marketing as well for most of those dollars. Here with Stryker, what we saw is that Stryker actually employed some of the same employees that used to work at DePuy. And those same employees that...
Well, why is that important? DePuy was also recalled, correct?
Right. The DePuy ASR had over 33,000 implants that were recalled, and they were aggressively marketed by a guy named Paul Berman. Paul Berman left DePuy after the recall, and he went to go work for Stryker Orthopedics. And what do we see in 2011? Aggressively marketed Stryker Rejuvenate. Paul Berman, the vice president of marketing, yet again markets another failed product, aggressively markets it, and Stryker Rejuvenate sees its highest boom in sales in 2011, the year before the recall.
And there's no question, all the people at Stryker had to do was look at the dishonest approach that, that this Berman was using to market DePuy, and they would have said, well, we certainly don't want them working for our company, but they hired him anyway, right?
That's right. If they had just looking at any of the surgeons' feedback that had worked with Paul Berman, especially those ones that had complained about the product, they would have realized that Paul Berman squashed those complaints and tried to make it to where the public never heard about them. And so I'm certain we're going to see the same thing with Stryker Rejuvenate as soon as we start getting the discovery of those documents.
What is Stryker doing, in about a minute, just sum up, what is Stryker doing right now to keep people from bringing lawsuits I mean, they've got to do something. You agree they can't keep this in their body, so something has to happen. What is the industry doing to prevent them from doing that?
Well, they've actually hired this claims company called Broadspire. It's the same company that was hired to handle the DePuy ASR recall. Broadspire's offered to pay for out-of-pocket medical expenses and lost wages, but essentially what we're seeing is they're wanting to get these patients to sign a release, and that release gives Stryker the rights to the prosthesis in the event that they do have a revision. That's a big no-no. You don't want the key piece of evidence laying in the hands of the defendant for them to be able to test that product first.
And they're not paying these people for any future pain and suffering, any problems, is that right?
Right. No future pain and suffering, no loss of earning capacity, nothing on punitive damages.
Just another scam if you really drill down. Daniel Nigh is an attorney handling cases against Stryker.